In this lecture, we will step away from our project to talk about classes. If you already know PHP classes, you can skip this lecture. For the rest of you, let's talk about classes in PHP. Throughout this course, we've written objects in JavaScript. But what about PHP? Does PHP support objects? The answer is yes. However, objects are written differently than objects in JavaScript. We must create something called a class. A class can be thought of as a blueprint for a house. Before a house is built, contractors must be given a blueprint for the home. The blueprint contains instructions and guidelines for the construction of a house. Without a blueprint, there may be issues. The same concept applies to PHP. PHP does not know what an object should look like. It needs help constructing an object. A class is considered a blueprint for creating an object. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to a PHP playground. We are going to be using this playground to create classes. First, let's remove the initial PHP code from the example. Next, let's define a class called house. A class can be defined by typing the class keyword. This class is followed by the name of the class. After typing the name of the classes, we can add curly brackets. The body of the class is written inside the brackets. Similar to objects in JavaScript, PHP objects can have properties and methods. Properties are variables for objects, whereas methods are functions for objects. Let's define a variable called color with an initial value of white. Let's pretend the color of our house is white. In the future, we may want to change the color of the house. Let's create a method for changing the color. Below the variable, define a function called setColor. This function will accept an argument called newColor. Lastly, let's update the color by setting the thisColor property to the newColor argument. The this keyword exists in the PHP language. It's a variable for accessing the properties from the same object. PHP will search for a variable called color. We do not need to include the $ symbol for the color variable. The $ symbol must be added at the beginning of the line. We can access properties and methods from an object by using an arrow. In JavaScript, we could access properties with a dot. It's different in PHP. We must use an arrow. After accessing the property, we can update the property. In this case, we're updating the property with the newColor argument. Our class is ready. Keep in mind, we've created a blueprint. The class is not a physical object that can be accessed. We must create an instance of a class. You may hear this word from time to time. An instance is a copy of a class. If a blueprint is the instructions for building a house, an instance would be the physical house itself. Below the class, let's create a variable called myHouse. The value for this variable will be the following code: new house. An instance must be stored in a variable. Otherwise, we would lose the instance. The instance can be created by typing the new keyword. This will instruct PHP to create an instance from a class. This is followed by the name of the class with parentheses. After creating an instance, let's try accessing the properties and methods from the class. We can access a class's information with the same syntax. We can write the name of the variable followed by an arrow. Let's try echoing the color property. This line will throw an error. By default, properties are not accessible outside of the class. Back in the class, let's add the public keyword to the color property. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to a list of access modifiers in PHP. An access modifier is a keyword for changing the accessibility of a property or method. We can prevent outside code from accessing a property. Access modifiers keep our classes secure. There are various reasons for using access modifiers. we won't be diving too deep into access modifiers. For now, just know that a property is not publicly accessible without the public keyword. By adding this keyword, our code should work. Before testing our code, let's update the color. Call the setColor function. I'm going to change the color of my house to blue. Lastly, I will echo the color property again. The setColor method does not need an access modifier. By default, methods are publicly accessible. Let's try running our code. After a few moments, the colors should appear. The house will originally be white. By calling the setColor method, the color has changed to blue. Overall, objects in PHP can be more complex to write than objects in JavaScript. Don't worry, we aren't going to be heavily using objects in our PHP code. It's going to become a relevant topic in the next lecture. Once you're ready, let's hop back into our project.